Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a bit of a shortcut, really, to get you up to speed on a book that genuinely shifted perspectives for so many people.
Yeah, a big one.
Right. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad came out back in, 1997?
That's right, 97. And it's kind of hard to pin down, isn't it? Part personal finance.
Part motivation, part self-help. It sort of blends them all. So here's a question to kick us off with something for you to think about. What if a lot of what we're commonly taught about, earning money, saving, planning for retirement, what if that's only part of the picture? What if the wealthy are playing a different game, one we don't usually learn about in school or even, around the dinner table?
Well, that's exactly the core of it, isn't it? Rich Dad, Poor Dad is built around Kiyosaki's story of his two father figures, basically.
No, the contrast.
Exactly. His biological dad, highly educated, the quote-unquote poor dad who believed in job security, climbing the ladder.
The traditional path.
The traditional path. And then his friend's dad, the rich dad, who offered this totally different kind of financial education. And the main idea really is how their mindsets were just worlds apart, and how that difference shows, Kiyosaki's path to actual wealth.
And it hinges on this thing he calls financial intelligence.
Yeah, financial intelligence. And critically, he defines that not as being book smart or getting top grades, but as really understanding the rules of money. How it works, how to make it, how to keep it, and crucially, how to make it work for you.
Knowing assets from liabilities.
That's fundamental.
Yeah.
Knowing the difference and then focusing on acquiring those assets.
Okay. So our mission here with this deep dive is basically to pull out the really key nuggets from Kiyosaki's book. We want to help you understand what he sees as the most important stuff for building that powerful financial mindset he talks about.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's unpack this. So one of the first big shifts, maybe the biggest, that Kiyosaki talks about is changing your focus, moving away from just earning income to actively acquiring assets. He has that famous line, something like,
the poor and middle class work for money.
Yeah, that's it.
The rich have money work for them.
It's a complete reorientation, really.
It really is. And the way he explains it is fascinating. The rich dad way of thinking pushes you beyond just asking, how much is my paycheck? To asking, what can I actually own that generates income for me?
So not just stocks and bonds.
Well, those can be part of it, sure. But it's broader.
Yeah.
It's about changing your whole viewpoint from being just an employee, a wage earner.
You being an owner.
Exactly. An owner of things that produce income. That could be real estate that cash flows, maybe a small business you build, intellectual property, anything really that puts money into your pocket.
Without you having to actively trade your time for every dollar.
Precisely. And conversely, you have liability things that take money out of your pocket. And he makes the point that people often mistake liabilities for assets, like maybe your primary home, if it's got a big mortgage and isn't bringing in any income.
Right. It feels like an asset, but it's costing you money month after month.
That's his argument, yeah.
Which leads us nicely into another key idea, really understanding how money works. Kiyosaki is pretty blunt about this. He says traditional schooling prepares us to be good employees.
Good workers.
But it rarely teaches us how to actually get rich. It's this concept that if you don't get the mechanics of money,
You'll just work for it your whole life.
instead of the other way around, having it work for you.
Yeah, and that points to a huge gap, he argues, in, conventional education. It's not just about getting a salary, it's about financial literacy, but on a much deeper level.
So what does that entail, according to him?
Well, he talks about needing to understand things like basic accounting, knowing how to read financial statements, investing, obviously, understanding how markets work, even things like the basics of law, maybe tax law, and communication skills. He lumps these all under that financial intelligence umbrella. And without that kind of education, he basically says people get stuck in the rat race, working harder and harder for money. They don't really know how to manage or make grow.
So investing in that knowledge.
He'd argue it's the most important investment you can possibly make. Investing in your own financial brain, so to speak.
And, this goes directly against the grain of the traditional secure career path, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
The poor dad philosophy.
Yeah.
Get good grades, find a safe job, maybe with a pension, climb the corporate ladder.
Yep, security above all.
Whereas the rich dad was all about, building your own thing, starting businesses, creating jobs yourself. It's a much more entrepreneurial view.
Very much so. And it brings up a really interesting question, right? Is that safe job actually the safest route in the long term.
What does he say about that?
Well, Kiyosaki argues that a lot of what holds people back is fear.
Fear of what? Losing the job.
Yeah, fear of losing the job, fear of not having enough money, fear of taking risks. He thinks these fears keep people trapped, chasing that paycheck.
Instead of building something independent.
Exactly. Building assets, maybe starting a business. He sees that as the path to breaking free from those fears and actually taking control of your financial future. Now, look, it's fair to point out criticisms here. People say his advice sometimes assumes you have capital to start with or a higher tolerance for risk than many people naturally do.
Right. Starting a business isn't easy or risk-free.
Definitely not. It carries huge risks.
Yep.
But I think the value isn't necessarily in saying everyone must start a business tomorrow. It's more about the mindset. It offers a framework, a different way to think.
Yeah.
For people who are willing to, commit to learning continuously about finance and maybe take some calculated risks.
Yeah, and the book itself, it's not like reading a textbook, is it? The source material we looked at mentioned its style is quite simple, very story-driven.
Totally. That's a big part of its appeal, I think. It makes these potentially complex financial ideas feel much more, accessible.
And inspiring, maybe.
Yeah, definitely inspirational for a lot of readers. It's written to make you think, to motivate you to actually take charge of learning this stuff, the stuff schools often skip.
So despite some criticisms...
Yeah, despite the critiques, and some are valid, like maybe oversimplifying certain financial realities or having that strong pro-entrepreneur bias, the book still gets recommended a lot.
Who's it best for, do you think?
Well, I'd say especially for maybe students, people just starting out with personal finance, or really anyone who feels like they want more financial independence but aren't sure how to think about it differently. It acts as a really powerful primer. It's less about giving you specific stock tips,
Right.
and much more about sparking that fundamental shift in how you view money, work, and what security actually means.
Okay. So pulling this all together, what does this mean for you, the listener? It's clear Rich Dad, Poor Dad is, it's more than just another finance book on the shelf. It's really about a different way of thinking.
A paradigm shift, almost.
Yeah, exactly. It really drives home this idea that, success isn't just about getting degrees and landing a good job. It's maybe more about getting the right kind of financial education and cultivating that specific mindset.
Absolutely. If we step back and look at the big picture, what we've talked about here highlights how the book just fundamentally questions a lot of common assumptions about money and careers. We touched on those key themes from the source, right? Focusing on assets that generate cash flow, not just earned income, really getting how money operates.
The entrepreneurial angle.
Yeah, the value placed on maybe building something yourself and seeing financial education itself as your most valuable asset. Ultimately, it's a call to become a lifelong learner when it comes to finance, to actively seek out that knowledge and then, crucially, apply it.
So it encourages action, not just reading.
Definitely. Which leads us to a final thought, maybe something for you to chew on. Given the strong emphasis the book puts on continuous financial learning and really changing your mindset. Think about this. What's one specific idea we've touched on today? Maybe it's that asset versus liability distinction. Maybe it's understanding good debt versus bad debt. Maybe the power of leverage, or even just questioning that whole job for security model.
Right.
What's one concept from this deep dive that you feel curious about now? Something you might want to explore further, or perhaps even think about applying in your own life to build what Kiyosaki calls your greatest asset.
Your mind.
Your mind, yeah.
That's a great question to end on. Something to really consider. This journey of discovery, as always, is just beginning. Thanks for diving deep with us today.